$5.2 billion. That's the new price tag for Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge replacement. Triple the original estimate. 6 dead. 20 months of investigation. And the NTSB just confirmed what insurance companies already knew. This wasn't an accident you can prevent with better maintenance. It was a mathematical certainty, because Baltimore wasn't alone. The NTSB identified 68 other bridges, spanning 19 states, facing the exact same catastrophic risk, and I'm going to show you which ones. March 26, 2024, 1:29 a.m. The Dali, a 984-foot container ship, loses power leaving Baltimore Harbor. 58 seconds of blackout. The crew tries everything. Anchors, bow thrusters, radio warnings. Nothing works. The ship drifts. Pier 17, the southern support of the Key Bridge, takes the full impact. 213 million pounds of steel and cargo. The bridge collapses in seconds. 6 highway workers, patching potholes, never had a chance. The NTSB investigation took 20 months. They pulled the ship's black box, interviewed the crew, examined every wire on that vessel. December 10th, 2025. They released the final report, 259 pages, and buried in the technical analysis was a calculation that should terrify anyone who drives over a bridge built before 1991. The Key Bridge was 30 times above the acceptable risk threshold set by the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. 30 times, not 30%. 30 times the maximum allowable risk. Here's the list. 68 bridges, 19 states, Golden Gate Bridge in California, Brooklyn Bridge in New York, Chesapeake Bay Bridge in Virginia, Mackinac Bridge in Michigan, 6 bridges across the Mississippi River in Louisiana alone, all of them built before 1991, all of them missing current vulnerability assessments. The NTSB sent urgent letters to 30 bridge owners in March 2025. The message: calculate your risk now. Some still haven't responded. But here's what the NTSB report doesn't tell you. Why these assessments were never done. Because the answer isn't engineering. It's economics. And if you think this investigation is about bridge safety, you're missing the real story. This is about a $373 billion funding gap, insurance companies quietly exiting the market, and states making calculated bets that federal bailouts will arrive before catastrophe strikes. If this kind of financial investigation is new to you, you're in the right place. We expose these economic systems every week. Hit subscribe. The vulnerability assessment calculation has existed since 1991. It's not complicated math. You input ship size, ship speed, vessel traffic volume, and pier lateral capacity. The formula spits out an annual frequency of collapse. If that number exceeds AASHTO's threshold, you're supposed to take action. Retrofit the piers, add fenders, restrict vessel traffic, something. Maryland had 34 years to run this calculation on the Key Bridge. They didn't, and I'm going to show you exactly why they chose not to. The NTSB ran the numbers after the collapse. For a critical bridge like the Key Bridge, AASHTO's acceptable risk is 0.01, meaning a 1 in 10,000 annual probability of collapse. The Key Bridge calculated at 0.3. That's 30 times higher. 0.3 means a 3 in 100 annual probability. Put another way, over the bridge's intended 50-year lifespan, there was an 87% chance of catastrophic collapse from a vessel strike. Not if, when. And here's where this gets personal. If you commute over a bridge built before 1991 that crosses a shipping channel, and you probably do, there's a decent chance your state transportation authority has never run this assessment either. Maryland helped write the AASHTO guidelines in 1991. They literally co-authored the standards, then ignored them for 3 decades. As of October 2024, they still haven't assessed the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Quick question for the comments. Do you know if your state has done these calculations? Type yes if your state has published vulnerability assessments. No if you have no idea. Here's the economic incentive that nobody wants to admit. Running the vulnerability assessment costs money, maybe $50,000 for engineering consultants. Implementing the recommendations, and that's where it gets expensive. Pier retrofits can cost $50 to $200 million per bridge. But if you never run the assessment, you never officially know about the risk. And if a collapse happens, federal disaster money covers 80 to 90% of replacement costs. Send this to anyone who thinks infrastructure failures are just bad luck. Let's run the Baltimore math. Maryland could have spent roughly $100 million retrofitting key bridge piers after the Panama Canal expansion increased ship sizes in 2016. They didn't. The bridge collapsed in 2024. Replacement cost, $5.2 billion. Federal government paying $4.7 billion. Maryland's share, $500 million. They gambled that 8 years of deferred investment plus $500 million in disaster cost sharing would be cheaper than $100 million in proactive spending. They were right, until 6 people died. This is the pattern across all 68 bridges. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates a $373 billion funding gap for bridges over the next decade. State transportation budgets can't cover that. So they triage new construction over maintenance, visible projects over invisible retrofits, potholes over pier reinforcements, and they bank on low probability, high consequence events, staying low probability just a little bit longer. Wait, I know what you're thinking. This can't be deliberate policy. Let me show you exactly how deliberate it is. This is the Federal Highway Administration's own risk acceptance framework. $373 billion. That's the infrastructure funding gap for bridges alone. Not roads, not dams, just bridges. Over 10 years. The federal government allocated $40 billion through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act in 2021. That leaves $333 billion unfunded. Bridge rehabilitation needs $191 billion. Replacing poor bridges, $69.7 billion. The math doesn't work. And remember the NTSB list from earlier. This is why those 68 assessments were never completed. This is why I investigate these financial systems. Subscribe if you want to see what else state agencies are hiding behind budget constraints. But we're not done, because behind every state budget decision is an insurance calculation. And after Baltimore, insurance companies started asking questions the state transportation authorities didn't want to answer. Within 3 months of the Key Bridge collapse, infrastructure insurance capacity dropped by 30%. Premiums increased 15 to 25%, and multiple carriers added exclusions for vessel strike damage on bridges without current vulnerability assessments. The industry saw the NTSB list and ran the same numbers we just reviewed. They're pricing in catastrophe. 6 men died on the Key Bridge. José Maynor López, Alejandro Hernández Fuentes, Dorlian Ronial Castillo Cabrera, Maynor Yacir Suazo Sandoval, Miguel Ángel Luna González, Carlos Hernández. They were patching potholes. Midnight shift, $43 an hour. They had 18 seconds between when the dolly lost power and when the bridge fell. 18 seconds wasn't enough time to run. The state spent decades debating whether pier reinforcement was worth $100 million. Their families are asking if 6 lives were worth anything at all. 34,000 vehicles crossed that bridge every day. 10% trucks. It was the only route for hazardous materials. Tunnels under Baltimore don't allow them. Now those trucks detour an extra 30 to 45 minutes. Supply chains disrupted. Shipping costs increased. Port of Baltimore lost $800 million in the first 3 months. But the spreadsheets don't show the workers who trusted that someone did the safety math. They don't teach this in transportation engineering programs. Now you know what state budget officers have known for decades. Some risks are cheaper to accept than prevent. Have you or someone you know worked on bridge maintenance? Share your story below about the safety culture you experienced. And here's the part about you. Because when the Key Bridge opened in 1977, container ships carried 800 boxes. Today's vessels, like the Dali, carry up to 24,000. The Panama Canal expansion in 2016 made these megaships viable. Ports upgraded to handle them. But the bridges? Still designed for 1970s traffic. 68 bridges, spanning navigation channels, now face ships 30 times heavier than what their peers were engineered to withstand. And I saved the most disturbing evidence for last. Baltimore, 1977. 21st century ship traffic through a 20th century bridge. Louisiana, Mississippi River crossings. Same pattern. New York, East River bridges. Same exposure. California, Golden Gate. Different water, identical math. Since 2021, over 300 vessels lost propulsion in US waterways, most near bridges. The NTSB identified that pattern 2 years before Baltimore collapsed. They issued recommendations. States acknowledged receipt, then did nothing. Check your state's Department of Transportation website. Search for Vessel Collision Bridge Assessment. Most will return 0 results. Send this to anyone who crosses a major bridge. They need to see this before the next $5 billion disaster. Here's the insurance industry's response. $350 million paid out by Chubb and other carriers for Baltimore property damage alone. Within 3 months, infrastructure capacity down 30%, premiums up 15 to 25%, vessel strike exclusions added for non-assessed bridges. One major underwriter told Risk and Insurance magazine they're re-examining appetite for bridge projects entirely. Translation? Insurance companies are pricing in what state governments are pretending doesn't exist. That 68 more Baltimores are mathematically probable within the next 20 years. Remember those earlier NTSB documents. Remember the $373 billion funding gap. This is how it becomes real. You will live through this. The question is whether you see it coming. This is happening now. Subscribe to understand the financial patterns before the next collapse makes headlines. So let's wrap with the uncomfortable truth. Running vulnerability assessments costs $50,000 per bridge. Retrofitting vulnerable piers, $50 to $200 million. For the 68 bridges on the NTSB list, that's $3.4 to $13.6 billion. States don't have it. The federal funding gap is $373 billion over 10 years. So they wait. And when catastrophe strikes, FEMA covers 80 to 90% through disaster relief. Here's my controversial take. This isn't ignorance. This isn't bureaucratic incompetence. It's deliberate cost-benefit analysis. States have calculated that accepting rare catastrophic loss plus federal bailout is cheaper than proactive spending. Tell me I'm wrong in the comments. Show me the state that spent the money before disaster proved them negligent. You can't unknow this. Every bridge news story, you'll recognize the pattern. Every shocking collapse, you'll see the economic incentive that preceded it. What will you do with this knowledge? What topic should I investigate next? Most interesting suggestion gets the next deep dive. Next week, I'm investigating the $3.7 trillion infrastructure report card that gave America a C grade while the funding gap increased. How does a grade improve while the problem gets worse? It's the same accounting trick we just uncovered, and it's bankrupting the country. If these financial investigations matter to you, subscribe and hit the bell. I expose what state agencies won't disclose and what mainstream infrastructure reporting ignores. Every single week, click here for the ASCE investigation. Or watch this breakdown of Florida's insurance market collapse if you missed it. See you in the next investigation.